Sarah Thompson stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her dark blue blazer one last time. At 16, she was one of the youngest members of Lincoln High School's award-winning debate team. Her mother always told her to dress professionally for debates, saying your appearance matters, even if it shouldn't. Those words echoed in her mind as she grabbed her backpack and headed downstairs. The morning sun streamed through their kitchen windows as Sarah's mother, Lisa Thompson, packed lunch for her daughter. "Don't forget, I need you home by 6, Lisa reminded her, sliding a sandwich into Sarah's lunch bag. "And sweetheart, good luck at the debate today." Sarah hugged her mother tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender perfume. The debate competition went better than Sarah expected. Her team won against Roosevelt High, and her argument about environmental protection policies earned her the highest speaker points. As she packed up her notes after the event, her debate coach, Mrs. Rodriguez, approached her with a broad smile. "That was exceptional work today, Sarah," Mrs. Rodriguez said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Keep this up, and you'll definitely be team captain next year." Sarah couldn't stop smiling as she walked out of the school building. The afternoon was still young, and the boutique downtown would be open for another 2 hours. Her mother's birthday was coming up next week, and she had saved money from her part-time library job to buy something special. The bus ride downtown took 20 minutes. Sarah used this time to check her phone, finding a message from her father, Dr. Marcus Thompson. "Heard about your win from Mrs. Rodriguez. Proud of you, princess. Will be home late tonight. Big case." Her father, a well-known civil rights attorney, always made time to acknowledge her achievements, no matter how busy his schedule was. When Sarah stepped into Eleanor's boutique, the little bell above the door chimed softly. The store was elegant, with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Classical music played quietly in the background. A few other customers browsed through the aisles, trying on scarves and examining jewelry. Sarah noticed her reflection in one of the many mirrors, a tall, slender girl with dark skin and braided hair, wearing her debate team blazer. She looked professional, just like her mother had taught her. Walking to the accessories section, she began looking for the perfect gift. Her mother had mentioned wanting a new scarf, and Sarah had seen some beautiful ones through the store window last week. As she moved through the store, Sarah felt eyes following her. The security guard, a middle-aged man with graying hair, seemed to appear at the end of every aisle she visited. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on finding the right gift. This wasn't the first time she'd been followed in a store, and her parents had long conversations with her about how to handle such situations. "Stay calm, keep your hands visible, and remember you have every right to be there." Near the scarf display, Sarah found what she was looking for, a silk scarf with beautiful blue and purple patterns. When she checked the price tag, her heart sank a little. It was $30 more than she had saved. Sighing softly, she carefully placed the scarf back on the display. She decided to look at some cheaper options in the sales section. Maybe she could find something else her mother would like. The security guard was still watching, now joined by a store employee who whispered something while glancing in her direction. Sarah kept her movements slow and deliberate as she browsed, her father's voice in her head reminding her, "You have nothing to prove to anyone." After 15 minutes of searching without finding anything in her price range, Sarah decided to leave and try the department store instead. As she turned toward the exit, she noticed more employees gathering near the front. The security guard spoke quietly into his radio, and 2 police officers entered the store. Sarah's heart began to beat faster, but she kept walking calmly toward the door. She had done nothing wrong. She was just a teenager looking for a gift for her mother. But somehow, she knew this ordinary day was about to become anything but ordinary. Taking a deep breath, she reached for her phone in her pocket. She might need to call her father soon. The 2 police officers blocked Sarah's path to the exit. One was tall with red hair, Officer Jenkins according to his name tag, and the other was shorter with a stern face, Officer Martinez. The store manager, a woman in her 50s wearing the gray suit, stepped forward with her arms crossed. "Excuse me, miss," Officer Jenkins said, his hand resting near his belt. "We need you to step aside for a moment." His voice was loud enough that other customers started turning to watch. Sarah's hands trembled slightly, but she remembered her father's lessons about dealing with law enforcement. "May I ask what this is about, officer?" she asked politely, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. The The store manager, whose name tag read Mrs. Eleanor Wilson, pointed at Sarah's backpack. "One of our expensive necklaces is missing from the display case. We have reason to believe it's in your possession." Her voice was sharp and accusing. Sarah felt her face grow hot as other customers began taking out their phones to record. "I didn't take anything," she said clearly. "I was just looking for a birthday gift for my mother, but everything was too expensive. You can check my backpack." Officer Martinez stepped closer. "Put your backpack on the counter and step back," he ordered. Sarah carefully placed her debate team backpack on the glass counter, watching as the officers unzipped every pocket. They pulled out her debate notes, spreading them across the counter. Her carefully organized folders fell apart, papers scattering. Next came her lunch bag, then her wallet, and finally her debate team medals. No necklace. "Turn out your pockets," Officer Jenkins demanded, his tone growing more aggressive. Sarah slowly pulled out her phone and house keys, placing them on the counter. An older white woman shopping nearby whispered loudly to her friend. "I knew she looked suspicious the moment she walked in." Sarah's eyes stung with tears, but she refused to cry. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. "I'm a student at Lincoln High," Sarah explained, her voice slightly shaky. "I just finished a debate competition. You can call my coach, Mrs. Rodriguez. Here's my student ID." She reached for her wallet on the counter, but Officer Martinez quickly grabbed her wrist. "Keep your hands where we can see them," he warned. The grip on her wrist was tight, and Sarah winced. More customers gathered around, some looking uncomfortable, others filming with their phones. The security guard stood nearby, walkie-talkie in hand, watching the scene unfold. Sarah took a deep breath and spoke clearly, remembering the confidence she had felt just hours ago during her debate. "I would like to call my father. He's an attorney, and I have the right to contact him." Mrs. Wilson laughed dismissively. "Of course you say your father's an attorney. Officer, the necklace is worth over $2,000. We should check her jacket, too." While Officer Jenkins continued searching through her belongings, Sarah managed to send a quick text to her father. "Dad, police at Eleanor's boutique downtown. They're accusing me of theft. Please come." The next 10 minutes felt like hours. Officer Martinez made her remove her debate blazer, checking all the pockets. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. Still, they kept her there, asking the same questions over and over. "Where did you put the necklace? Who are you working with? How did you get it out of the display case?" Sarah answered each question truthfully. "I didn't take any necklace. I don't know what you're talking about. I was only looking at scarves for my mother." The crowd of onlookers grew larger. Some people shook their heads in disapproval, though Sarah wasn't sure if they were disapproving of her or the way she was being treated. A young man near the entrance said loudly, "This isn't right," but no one did anything to help. Just as Officer Jenkins started suggesting they should take this downtown, the store's bell chimed. Sarah looked up to see her father walking in, still wearing his court suit, his law firm badge visible on his jacket. His face was calm, but Sarah knew that look in his eyes. Dr. Marcus Thompson was ready for battle. The atmosphere in the store shifted instantly. Dr. Marcus Thompson walked into Eleanor's boutique with the confidence of someone who had fought and won hundreds of court cases. His polished black shoes clicked against the marble floor as he approached the scene. The crowd parted like waves, creating a clear path to his daughter. "Sarah," he said calmly, his deep voice carrying across the now quiet store. "Are you all right?" When she nodded, he turned to face the officers. "I'm Dr. Marcus Thompson, Sarah's father and a civil rights attorney with Anderson and Thompson Law Firm. Badge number 47,591. He held up his bar association card. "Now, would someone please explain why my 16-year-old daughter is being detained?" Officer Jenkins straightened his posture, suddenly looking less sure of himself. "Sir, the store reported a missing necklace, and we had reasonable suspicion." "Reasonable suspicion?" Dr. Thompson interrupted, his voice remaining steady but gaining an edge. "Please explain the specific behaviors that led to this suspicion. Was there video evidence of theft? Did anyone actually see my daughter take anything?" Mrs. Wilson, the store manager, stepped forward. She was acting suspicious, walking around the store, looking at different items. "You mean shopping?" Dr. Thompson raised an eyebrow. My daughter, a high school honor student and debate team member, was shopping for her mother's birthday. Since when is that suspicious behavior? Sarah watched her father work, doing what he did best, fighting injustice with knowledge and composure. She noticed how some of the customers who had been recording earlier now looked embarrassed, lowering their phones. Officers, Dr. Thompson continued, have you even verified that a necklace is actually missing? Have you checked the security cameras, or did you simply take the word of the management and decide to harass a minor without proper investigation? Officer Martinez shifted uncomfortably. We were responding to a call. And in responding to that call, Dr. Thompson cut in, you detained a minor without contacting her parents. Physically grabbed her. He glanced at Sarah's wrist where Officer Martinez had grabbed her, and searched her belongings without proper cause or consent. Are you familiar with the Watson versus City of Portland case from 2019? The officers exchanged glances. The store security guard had backed away, suddenly very interested in his shoes. Furthermore, Dr. Thompson pulled out his phone. I've been recording this conversation since I arrived. I can see at least 7 other people have been recording as well. So we have plenty of evidence of what's transpired here. Mrs. Wilson's face had lost its accusatory expression, replaced by growing concern. Dr. Thompson, perhaps we can discuss this in my office. No, Mrs. Wilson, we will discuss this right here, where my daughter was publicly humiliated. He turned to the officers again. Now, either charge my daughter with a crime, which I strongly advise against given the complete lack of evidence, or end this detention immediately. The silence in the store was heavy. Even the background music seemed to have stopped. Officer Jenkins cleared his throat. Miss Thompson is free to go. We apologize for any inconvenience. Inconvenience? Dr. Thompson shook his head. This was not an inconvenience. This was racial profiling, a civil rights violation, and a traumatic experience for a minor. I will be filing formal complaints with your department and the city council. He helped Sarah collect her scattered debate materials, carefully placing each paper back in her folders. As he picked up her debate team medals, he held them up for everyone to see. These are my daughter's awards from today's debate competition, where she'd argued about environmental justice. She came here to buy her mother a birthday gift, and this is how she was treated. The shame in the room was palpable. Some customers had tears in their eyes. Others were walking out, shaking their heads at the store management. Come on, Sarah, Dr. Thompson said gently, putting his arm around her shoulders. Your mother is waiting at home. He turned one last time to Mrs. Wilson and the officers. Expect to hear from my office tomorrow morning. And Mrs. Wilson, you might want to check behind your display cases for that missing necklace. In my experience, most missing items are simply misplaced. As they walked out, Sarah held her head high, just like her father taught her. The store's bell chimed one last time as they left, marking the end of a terrible experience but the beginning of something bigger, a fight for change that was just getting started. The next morning, Eleanor's boutique opened an hour late. The store employees watched as Mrs. Wilson and 2 maintenance workers carefully moved the heavy jewelry display case. Behind it, partially hidden under a dust bunny, lay the supposedly stolen necklace. Meanwhile, Dr. Thompson sat in his home office, his fingers moving quickly across his keyboard. Sarah sat across from him, still wearing her pajamas, watching her father work. The morning news played quietly on his office TV, showing clips of the incident from yesterday. Someone had shared their video online, and it had gone viral overnight. Look at this, Sarah, Dr. Thompson said, turning his computer screen towards her. 12 similar complaints against Eleanor's boutique in the past year alone, all involving young people of color. He shook his head, adding this information to his growing document. The phone rang. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, Sarah's debate coach. Sarah, the whole school is talking about what happened, she said when Sarah answered. The debate team wants to change our next topic to racial profiling in retail stores. Would you be willing to help? Before Sarah could answer, another call beeped through. This time it was a local news reporter wanting to interview her about the incident. Her father took the phone. No interviews right now, he said firmly. My daughter needs time to process this experience. Around noon, the police department called. The chief of police herself wanted to meet with them. Internal Affairs is investigating both officers, she explained. We'd like your input on improving our training procedures. Sarah watched as her father wrote everything down in his neat handwriting. He had taught her that documentation was power. Always keep records. He would say, paper trails don't lie. Lisa Thompson, Sarah's mother, brought them lunch, her eyes still red from crying after watching the video last night. She placed a sandwich in front of Sarah and kissed her forehead. Baby, I'm so sorry you went through that, but I'm so proud of how you handled yourself. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Tommy Chen, a boy from her debate team. Video hit 1 million views. You're trending on Twitter. Everyone's on your side. The doorbell rang. When Lisa opened the door, she found Mrs. Wilson from Eleanor's boutique standing there, holding a fancy gift bag and looking nervous. Dr. Thompson went to the door. We found the necklace, Mrs. Wilson said quietly, her face red with shame. It had fallen behind the display case. I came to apologize personally. She tried to hand the gift bag to Sarah. This is the scarf you were looking at yesterday. I want you to have it. Sarah stood tall, just like during her debates. No, thank you, she said firmly. I don't want a gift. I want changes in your store policies. I want training for your staff. I want other kids to feel safe while shopping. Dr. Thompson nodded proudly at his daughter's words. Mrs. Wilson, save the scarf, he said. Instead, use that money to start anti-bias training for your employees. My office will send you a proposal this afternoon. After Mrs. Wilson left, Sarah's phone kept buzzing with messages of support. Her debate team members, her teachers, even students from other schools. Everyone wanted to help make things right. Dad, Sarah said, looking at all the messages, can we do something bigger with this? Not just fix one store, but help other kids who might face the same thing. Dr. Thompson smiled, reaching for a fresh legal pad. What do you have in mind, Princess? Sarah sat up straighter, her debate training kicking in. First, we need better laws protecting shoppers from profiling. Second, we need a way for people to report incidents easily. And third, she took a deep breath. I want to start a student group that teaches young people about their rights. Her father began writing down her points. This was no longer just about one incident in one store. This was about creating real change. And Sarah, who had walked into Eleanor's boutique yesterday as a regular teenage girl, was now becoming a leader in that change. The phone rang again. This time, it was a civil rights organization wanting to help. Sarah looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. She picked up the phone, ready to turn her painful experience into something powerful. 1 month after the incident at Eleanor's boutique, Sarah stood at a podium in the city council chamber. The room was packed with people, including news reporters with their cameras. Her debate team sat in the front row, all wearing their blue blazers to support her. My name is Sarah Thompson, she began, her voice clear and strong. I'm 16 years old, and I'm here to tell you why we need the Fair Shopping Act. She looked down at her note cards, but she didn't really need them. She had practiced this speech many times. Last month, I was wrongly accused of theft because of how I look. But I'm not here to talk about just my story. I'm here because hundreds of other young people have shared similar stories with me. Behind her sat Dr. Thompson and Lisa, both beaming with pride. Next to them was Officer Martinez, who had surprised everyone by becoming one of their strongest supporters after the incident. He had asked to join their cause, saying he wanted to help train other officers to do better. Since my video went viral, Sarah continued, over 500 young people have contacted me through our new website, shareyourstory.org. They've all faced racial profiling while shopping. This has to stop. In the audience, Mrs. Wilson from Eleanor's boutique nodded. Her store had become the first to adopt the new Shop with Respect program that Sarah and her father had created. Now, every employee had to take anti-bias training, and the store had hired a diverse group of new staff members. Our Fair Shopping Act will require 3 things, Sarah explained, counting on her fingers like she did in debate competitions. First, all stores must have clear rules about when they can stop and search customers. Second, stores must keep records of who they stop and why to check for racial bias. Third, all retail workers must take anti-bias training every year. The city council members leaned forward, paying close attention. One of them, Mrs. Rodriguez's sister, had helped Sarah write the proposal. Tommy Chen, from Sarah's debate team, stood up and showed pictures on a big screen. They were screenshots from their website, showing hundreds of stories from other young people who had been profiled in stores. But we're not just asking for laws, Sarah said. We're creating solutions. Our student group, Youth for Retail Justice, now has chapters in 15 high schools. We're teaching young people about their rights, and we're working with stores to make shopping fair for everyone. Officer Martinez stood up next. As a police officer, he said, I've learned that we need to change how we respond to these calls. Thanks to Sarah and Dr. Thompson, our department now has new training programs. We're learning to question assumptions and investigate properly before taking action. Sarah pointed to a group of store managers in the audience. 10 stores in our city have already joined our program. They're showing that treating all customers with respect is good for business. Eleanor's boutique sales have gone up by 20% since they made their changes. Mrs. Wilson smiled and nodded. Her store had become an example for others, turning a mistake into a chance to lead positive change. Today, I'm asking you to pass the Fair Shopping Act, Sarah said, looking at each council member. But I'm also asking everyone here to think about how we treat each other. Change doesn't just come from laws. It comes from people deciding to do better. The room burst into applause when Sarah finished speaking. Her debate team jumped up, cheering loudly. Dr. Thompson wiped tears from his eyes, and Lisa blew her daughter a kiss. As Sarah walked back to her seat, she remembered how scared she had felt in Eleanor's boutique just 1 month ago. Now, that fear had turned into strength. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another message from a student wanting to start a Youth for Retail Justice chapter at their school. The city council president stood up. Thank you, Miss Thompson. Your courage in turning a painful experience into positive change is remarkable. We'll vote on the Fair Shopping Act next week, but I think I speak for everyone when I say you've already changed our city for the better. Sarah sat between her parents, holding both their hands. She wasn't just a student or a debate team member anymore. She had become something more, a leader who was helping to build a fairer world, one store at a time. 3 months after Sarah's speech at the city council, she sat in front of her television with her parents, watching the evening news. The announcement they had been waiting for was about to begin. Breaking news, the reporter said, smiling into the camera. The Fair Shopping Act is passed with a unanimous vote. This makes our city the first in the country to have such strong protections against retail profiling. Sarah jumped off the couch, hugging her parents tightly. Her phone immediately started buzzing with messages from her debate team members and Youth for Retail Justice supporters. That's our girl, Lisa said proudly, wiping happy tears from her eyes. You did this, Sarah. You really did this. Dr. Thompson's phone rang. It was the mayor's office, inviting them to the official signing ceremony tomorrow. They want Sarah to speak at the event, he said, covering the phone with his hand. Sarah nodded eagerly. Later that evening, as Sarah worked on her speech for tomorrow, someone knocked on their door. It was Officer Jenkins, the other police officer from the incident at Eleanor's boutique. He looked different now, more humble. Miss Thompson, he said, removing his cap. I heard about the law passing. I wanted to come personally to tell you that you've changed how I see things. Because of you, I went back to school to study civil rights law. I want to help make things better. Sarah invited him in. Over cups of hot chocolate that Lisa made, Officer Jenkins shared how the incident had made him question everything he thought he knew about policing. He was now helping train new officers, using Sarah's case as an example of what not to do. Your father was right that day, Officer Jenkins admitted. We acted without proper investigation. But what amazes me is how you turned that terrible moment into something that will help thousands of people. The next morning, the City Hall steps were crowded with people. News cameras pointed at the podium where Sarah stood with the mayor. Her entire debate team was there, along with hundreds of members from Youth for Retail Justice chapters across the city. When I was wrongly accused of theft, Sarah began her speech. I felt alone and scared. But looking at all of you today, I see that none of us is ever truly alone when we stand up for what's right. She pointed to the crowd where Mrs. Wilson stood with her new diverse staff from Eleanor's boutique. The store had become a model for other businesses, showing how treating all customers with respect led to better business. This law is just the beginning, Sarah continued. Already, 20 other cities have contacted us about passing similar laws. Our website has collected over 10,000 stories from people who face profiling. But more importantly, we've collected stories of change, stores that are doing better, police officers who are learning, and young people who are speaking up. The mayor stepped forward with the bill, signing it into law while cameras flashed. Sarah's debate coach, Mrs. Rodriguez, hugged her tightly. From winning debates to changing laws, she whispered, "I always knew you were special." After the ceremony, a group of young black girls approached Sarah for autographs. "We want to be like you," one of them said shyly. "You showed us that we can make big changes." Sarah looked at these girls, remembering how she felt just a few months ago. "You can do even more," she told them. "This is just the start." That evening, Sarah's family had a small celebration at home. Dr. Thompson raised his glass of sparkling cider for a toast. "To my daughter, who turned pain into power and fear into change." Lisa brought out a special gift. It was wrapped in elegant paper with a silver bow. Sarah opened it carefully. Inside was the blue and purple silk scarf she had wanted to buy that day at Eleanor's boutique. "I went back and bought it last week," Lisa explained. "Not because of what happened, but because my daughter deserves something beautiful to wear when she's out changing the world." Sarah wrapped the scarf around her shoulders, standing tall like she always did during debates. On the TV, they replayed clips from the morning's ceremony. Her phone kept buzzing with congratulation messages and requests for interviews. But Sarah was already thinking about what came next. This wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning of a bigger journey toward justice and change. Sarah Thompson stood at the entrance of Eleanor's boutique, taking a deep breath before pushing open the door. The familiar bell chimed, but everything else about the store had changed since that day 1 year ago. The security guard who greeted her was Amy Chen, Tommy's older sister, who had been hired as part of the store's new diverse security team. The walls now displayed signs in multiple languages stating the shop with respect policies. Near the counter, a clear poster showed customers their rights and the store's commitment to fair treatment. "Welcome back, Sarah," Mrs. Wilson called out warmly. She was arranging a new display with the help of her staff, which now looked like a beautiful rainbow of different races and ages. The store had become the most successful branch in their chain, proving that doing the right thing was also good for business. Sarah wasn't here just to shop today. She was here to film a special news segment. A national TV channel was doing a story about how one incident in a small boutique had started a movement that was changing the country. In just 1 year, the reporter said into her camera, "The Fair Shopping Act has been adopted by 50 cities across America." And it all started with a brave 16-year-old girl who refused to let injustice go unchallenged. The camera turned to Sarah, who now stood confidently in her debate team blazer, wearing the blue and purple silk scarf her mother had given her. "When I was accused of theft that day," she said, "I never imagined it would lead to all this." The reporter followed Sarah through the store as she explained the changes. They stopped at a wall covered with photographs. Sarah speaking at City Council, Youth for Retail Justice meetings, training sessions with police officers, and celebration rallies in different cities. "Our organization now has chapters in over 200 high schools," Sarah explained. "We train more than 5,000 store employees and 3,000 police officers. But the numbers I'm most proud of are these." She pointed to a chart showing how incidents of retail profiling had dropped by 70% in stores that followed their program. Officer Martinez and Officer Jenkins appeared on camera next. Both men had become regular speakers at police training sessions, using their own experience to teach others. "Sarah Thompson didn't just change our city," Officer Martinez said. "She changed how we see our jobs and our responsibilities to the community." The camera followed Sarah to her high school, where she was now a senior and president of both the debate team and Youth for Retail Justice. In the school library, she met with students who were preparing to start new chapters in other cities. "Remember," she told them, "change doesn't happen overnight. But it does happen when we stand up, speak out, and work together." Dr. Thompson watched proudly from the doorway. His law firm now had a special division dedicated to helping other cities pass their own fair shopping acts. Lisa stood beside him, wearing her birthday scarf. She had bought one just like Sarah's to match her daughter. After the filming, Sarah's family gathered in their living room to watch the sunset through their big windows. On the coffee table lay college acceptance letters. Sarah had been offered scholarships from several top universities that were impressed by her leadership and advocacy work. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, playing with the fringe of her scarf. "Remember how scared I was that day in the store? Now, when I look back, I realize that moment didn't make me afraid, it made me strong. Her father nodded. You turned your trial into triumph, baby girl. You showed everyone that justice isn't just about laws, it's about changing hearts and minds. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message. A small town in Texas had just passed their version of the Fair Shopping Act. Below the news was a photo of young protesters celebrating, holding signs that read, "Be like Sarah," and "Shop with respect." You know what makes me happiest? Sarah said, showing her parents the photo. It's knowing that somewhere, a young person is walking into a store without fear. They're being treated with respect, not suspicion. And maybe they don't even know my name or this story, but their life is better because we all stood up for change. As the sun set outside their window, Sarah Thompson smiled, knowing that this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning of a lifetime of fighting for justice, one store, one city, one law at a time. The teenage girl who had once been wrongly accused had become a national leader, proving that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest moments of courage.